All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our final day of SAS Innovate. We hope you've had an amazing week so far. We're going to end the week on a bang with our with our today's presentation speaker. I'm very pleased and excited to introduce Steve Overton to the stage. Steve, come on up.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. I know it's one of the last presentations, so thank you all for coming. Today we're going to talk about a lot of good things. We're going to talk about how to enhance investigations by fusing data to build risk-prioritized networks. And there's a lot to that, but the thing I want to highlight is the common glue across all of that is going to be something we like to call financial intelligence. There's a lot of different types of financial intelligence, but we're going to break them down here in a second. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what financial intelligence is. We're going to talk about the impact of it. That'll be brief. We'll talk about some of the challenges in the industry. And again, this is primarily for banks, FIUs, and law enforcement in the public sector. We're going to outline a solution. We'll do a deep dive with some quick demonstration, and then I'll leave you guys with something I hope challenges you in the industry moving forward. So first, let's talk about what is the ecosystem. By a show of hands, how many banks are in the room? All right, good. We got a lot of you guys. Any law enforcement or public sector folks? Cool, very cool. Is anybody from an FIU? Probably, and I didn't expect that. So the ecosystem is pretty broad, and a theme I'm going to talk about a lot in this presentation is just zooming out. Let's try to get out of our silos, and I want to try to help us wrap our heads around the bigger ecosystem and the mission we're all fighting here, and that's the mission of combating transnational crime through the use of financial intelligence, and we'll get into the solutions of this in a second. But as you can see, there's a lot of different players to this. There's banks, there's law enforcement. Banks typically are going to be your initiators of financial intelligence through things like regulatory reports, things like suspicious activity reports, CTRs, any type of BSA filing. Your FIUs are going to be at the country level. This is like in the US, we have FinCEN. In other countries, every country has their own FIU. I consider these the collectors of financial intelligence. From there, FIUs distribute their intelligence to the consumers of them, which are mostly law enforcement, but it also includes your intelligence community, prosecutors, and things like the Department of Justice. These are the enforcers of financial intelligence, which actually have the wonderful challenge of combining this whole theme of financial intelligence with everything else they have got to have: arrest records, open source intelligence, all the different various types of data they deal with. And then, of course, there's a feedback loop. If you haven't heard about this, this is kind of the thread of public-private sector collaboration. So a lot of the law enforcement folks work with banks through different processes to provide feedback back to banks on how to provide better financial intelligence. And the really cool thing with this is SAS is in every piece of this ecosystem. So this is something that we're excited about is, we've been with banks for decades. We've been in law enforcement and FIUs around the world for a very long time. Our analytics and our subject matter expertise is across the board here. So what is the mission? The mission, I like to kind of pause here and think that when I first started to try to come up with this presentation and come up with this concept, my mind kept getting stuck on financial crime, follow the money. But that's really just a piece of this. If I'm a bank looking for fraud or money laundering, that could lead me to any number of transnational crime activities that we're going to look through next. But I want to kind of highlight that whole ecosystem is really combating this. It's really got the same mission of fighting transnational crime through the use of financial intelligence. So what is that? A lot of things: drugs, guns, human trafficking, the classic scams, money laundering, bribery. There's all kinds of things. So the point being, the white-collar crime, the financial crime, is only a piece of this. The financial intelligence that you guys at banks collect and feed through FIUs and provide to law enforcement really fight a much bigger fight. So what's the impact? Basically, a lot of money goes out the door with fraud. A lot of money gets laundered. A lot of money is used in organized crime. And banks, you guys, spend a lot of money trying to keep up with the compliance aspects of this, detect fraud and fight the fight. So let's talk about some challenges. Again, 3 buckets: banks, FIUs, law enforcement. Everybody's got the same challenge of not enough money, not enough budget, not enough resources, especially here in the US, right? We've got the federal government's got a lot of chaos going around in the space. But in essence, everyone's got the same challenge. But from a business perspective, banks have the fun challenge of looking through tons of their transactions and their customers to find the needle in the haystack. And the sad part is most anti-money laundering systems are maybe 5% accurate, meaning 90 to 95% of the alerts that are generated, thousands of them, are false positives. So banks are looking for that needle in the haystack. And I got to say, if you're using SaaS, maybe that's a little bit better. Maybe we get you down to 80, 85%. I'm just kidding. But so banks have the challenge of finding the needle in the haystack. And when they pass that financial intelligence to the FIU, now the FIU has the challenge of they're dealing with a stack of needles. So everything that comes to the FIU in our ecosystem is suspicious. So they have the challenge of how do I connect it all? How do I prioritize it? What's important out of everything else that's flowing in? Because everything is suspicious and everything is got a lot of questions and other things they have to figure out. And then of course law enforcement, the furthest downstream, they've got to connect that financial intelligence with all the other intelligence they have. And that's a ton of work. Oftentimes they're not as embracing of technology, especially more the state level agencies. So we're trying to encourage, the goal of this presentation is to provide you guys with a blueprint that could be used within your organization to tackle certain problems that I'll cover in a second, or a broader level ecosystem solution to help streamline a lot of this. So here's the solution side of this. This is probably the highest level thing I'll talk about today. Again, we won't have time to break down every single specific thing. So if you stay till the end, I'll give you my contact information. Happy to break this down in detail further, show you how this really works with some real data. But essentially, this is the holistic solution that you could use across the board. In AML or fraud, it's a same type of concept, right? If I'm a bank, like most of you are, and I'm monitoring for fraud or AML, it's the same approach. You've got source data flowing through a different engine to connect it for data management. You may or may not be doing any resolution. That's one big piece I'll talk about in a second. But you definitely have scoring and alerting and investigations to investigate AML, sanctions, fraud, things like that. The law enforcement side, similar thing. But again, law enforcement is going to have all kinds of data they have to fuse. So from a law enforcement perspective, the network generation piece is a huge factor here, or anybody in the public sector where you may have all kinds of data, procurement data, right? If you're looking at procurement integrity, there's a ton of sources of information that you're looking at for vendors to onboard those. So we're going to break this down one at a time. One of my favorite quotes is everything starts and ends with data. So from a SaaS platform perspective, I'm really excited to get into a lot of our newer features these days where we can ingest, obviously structured data. If SaaS can touch it, we can ingest it. But what I want to kind of share with you guys and open your eyes a little bit is the data extraction more on the unstructured side, using tools like our NLP we'll talk about in a second. But just keep in mind, as you guys are planning your different enterprise approaches, keep in mind, from a high-level requirements perspective, we can handle structured or unstructured data. This is where all the planning goes around all the other types of intelligence that you want to merge with financial intelligence. All of that stuff comes into play. If you're a bank, like many of you are, a lot of this is simple. It's really your core data provider, your SIF data, your wire data, your ACH data. All of that information is the same thing. They're all disparate systems. Nothing's designed to talk to each other, and a lot of that has to be brought in and standardized through this. There's a presentation after mine. Mary Osborne's going to get into a lot of the NLP stuff, but what I'll say about that we've been doing a lot of work with lately in the context of financial intelligence is how do I extract entities from data to enrich my networks? And I'll talk about that in a second. So NLP can be used for that. Another big one is geographical identification. I worked with a bank a couple years ago that will remain nameless, where one of the biggest things we helped them with, just through the use of geographical identification, was identifying the country on the originating side of the wire and the beneficiary side of the wire. They were doing a manual process in the wire room just to kind of eyeball and see where was it going or where was it coming to. Real simple step, but it added a lot of visibility just to be able to monitor for, am I sending a wire to not necessarily a country with sanctions, but we looked a lot at near neighbors. So, Republic of Georgia or other countries that may be near Russia or North Korea or something. So that's some of our geographical identification stuff you can do as well. Data prep, we've got a lot of the same match code stuff we've had for a while. These are still important though, because when we get to building networks, they're also equally important to understand. The fuzzy code matching you can do will help enrich some of the network analytics we can do. So keep all of these things in mind as you're looking at an overall strategy to do this type of stuff. This is my favorite part. This is really the core of what we're talking about. Entity resolution, has anybody heard of that? Is that a buzzword that everyone gets? And does anybody not know that? I'll cover it briefly. So entity resolution is essentially connecting the dots across disparate data, right? So if I've got names of people from 3 different tables, I'm using names, DOBs, addresses, common identifiers to resolve one entity that points me to those 3 different records. So I can identify a unique person across any sets of data. That could also mean something even simpler than that. That's the common example. Another example could be phone numbers, emails, IPs, crypto wallets. There's a lot of very simple things that could also be considered entity resolution that are coming from the various source data points you guys are going to have in your ecosystem. So we have tools called RTANG, real-time entity network generation. That's something to pass on to your technical folks to look into. That's our latest tool we use to do entity resolution and form networks. It's phenomenal. I use it all the time. So if you guys want to see a demo of this, I could show you with real data how well it works. One of the key outputs to this, and this is, by the way, this is the key to fusing the data, right? So for looking at information in its totality, this is the key step to fusing that information together. One of the other key outputs to this is network generation. I look at networks, especially in the banking world, as measuring the possibilities of someone's, or measuring the opportunity to commit whatever I think I'm doing, whether it's fraud, AML, whatever, right? I'll give you an example. Let's say you guys have, let's say you're a bank and you've got 3 commercial clients, just sole props. And maybe that person is also listed as a member of another LLC that's got partners. Let's say maybe one of those partners has another business that's maybe a marijuana business or some other high-risk entity. Understanding that broader network from the very beginning, the single individual that may just be a simple person has a different level of risk based on his opportunity to use different assets and relationships he's got. So from a network-based perspective, the challenge I have for banks, and don't just go drop this into production tomorrow, but maybe consider as a part of KYC or your CDD processes or your scoring processes for measuring risk, maybe consider this other dimension in CDD to measure opportunity to do the things you think they're doing, based on the data you have available. It could be relationship data within your SIF data. It could be who they transact with. It could be wire data. It could be a number of things that establish a network to build that. So we have a big network generation process. Again, I can break that into detail later. We don't have time today to get into the details. This is the fun stuff. We've all seen a lot at this conference, all the analytics and it was amazing to me how fast they took this whole thing down, but all the fun demos we saw here get into all the text analytics, the network analytics. Just the network analytics alone is its own conversation. I love that a lot. But again, the presentation right after me, Mary's going to give a really good talk about a lot of the work she does. We have found it extremely powerful back to the world of financial intelligence to use NLP to extract entities and connect that back to my other information. And you'll see that in our demo here in a second. Extracting themes, extracting what types of intelligence are going to exist in narratives that we don't typically monitor because they're not standardized. From a network perspective, connected components. This is essentially the 2-minute overview of all this. These are the most effective algorithms I've seen. But, and I will say, some of our best documentation comes from Proc Network. Right now, you can get to it today, but if you go to support.sas.com, our Proc Network documentation is some of the best, most thorough documentation we have. So if you're curious about learning it, I would just go right there, because there's examples, there's good explanations, there's tons of information if you guys have that available. But what's powerful about it is once I have all of my data joined in and fused and entities are resolved and everything's managed, the next step is how do I analyze those networks to find out who's connected to who are my key players, where do the most pathways flow between. Connected components is a really interesting one because basically it says if you're in the same connected component as someone else, that means we can all somehow touch each other between 1 or 20 degrees away. That's a very simple metric, but it runs very fast. Communities are also very interesting because if your connected component is too big, communities will mathematically break that down into much smaller chunks based on the size of data you've got. Network complexity, this is a fun one. If you guys are experimenting with this, the metrics I find the most productive are network diameter and network density. This helps measure the maximum width of a network and then how many links are branching within that network. Again, I get back to, from a banking perspective, what is someone's opportunity to commit a crime? If they're in a very wide, complex network, it's going to be very different than someone who's just rents an apartment and they don't have many connections at all. So just consider those as possible dimensions in a customer risk scoring model. Shortest path, another good one. Watch list monitoring. If anybody does watch list monitoring, the thing I'd love to get opinions on is, do you have a concern about people on watch lists separating themselves from your monitoring through some of the different relationships they can have? So for example, if I'm a smart criminal and I know I'm on a sanctions list, why not just create some shell companies and avoid beneficial ownership levels and just create a series of subsidiaries to avoid sanctions monitoring? Shortest path could help you find that, potentially. Just ideas, things like that. They're not meant to just go straight to production today, but just wanted to share with you as ideas, things that could challenge you. Alerting, favorite thing we do here. So once we've produced all these different things, the way we operationalize this is through a product at SAS called Intelligent Decisioning, and all of that flows through into our investigations platform. We'll actually see some screenshots of that here in a second. The most important thing here is our scorecard approach. So a lot of it within law enforcement as well as banks, we have to have data-driven, intelligence-driven investigations. This is where we can solve that through a scorecard approach that summarizes everything we've just covered, and I'll show you some screenshots of that in a second. Yeah, let's just jump straight to it. This will be the fun thing. Does everybody know what a suspicious activity report is? Does anybody not know what a SAR is? I'll cover it briefly. So basically, a SAR, I'll just call it, every bank files some form of what's called a suspicious activity report. Some countries call it different things, like an STR. In Europe, it's called a GO-AML form. It's basically a report by a bank, again, a regulatory report that is the financial intelligence we've been talking about, that banks file where they document something they have found suspicious that's happening at their bank. And it's a longer story, but that's probably the oversimplified way to say it. In this example, I'm going to cover, this is more from the lens of law enforcement. I'll try to apply it to banks. But in this example and series of screenshots, we're going to look at how SAR review teams across the US could use basically this process we're talking about of financial intelligence to build networks, risk prioritize those networks of SARs, and find the most impactful ones first. That's our goal here. And to kind of tee it up, to state what's happening right now, law enforcement works a lot of this in a spreadsheet. So they literally will take a lot of SARs, go through one by one, sort it in descending order, and pick just the ones that look bad. But there's no intelligence joined in any of that. It's really just sort of staring and comparing. So if you get to line 200, you don't remember the address you read on line 5, let alone all the other possible connections that can flow through it. So if you don't know what a SAR is, we have some screenshots. Nothing too crazy here. It's basically a big form banks fill out. you get information about the subject that's being filed on, where they bank, their email address, phone number, that kind of stuff. Banks provide their intelligence about what they suspect. This is not the underlying crime. This is really just, what does the bank think is going on? And that's all it is. There's actually a big narrative on the end I don't have a screenshot of, but just to give you an idea, law enforcement takes all of this information, and there are thousands of these just for the Eastern District of North Carolina. There's millions that are filed every single year. So within SAS, the way we attack this is that entire process I just showed you earlier is surfaced through this. So within our intelligence platform, we have alerts. The alerts across the top where you can see right now that where we're at, we have alerts that you go to. And we'll just start the first one. Francisco Garza is someone who we've thought is the most riskiest person, and out of all the SARs that we've collected, fused, joined, ran analytics on, this is the highest risk person we have who we think law enforcement could have the most impactful investigation. Why? It's because this person has had 33 SARs across 11 banks in 3 different jurisdictions, $62 million, and they're basically in a giant network. These are some highlights. And then, of course, law enforcement can go through, filter and sort, route, that kind of stuff. We have a scorecard to explain the data behind why this person's risky. So just like at a bank, if you're doing an AML program or a fraud program, it's the same concept, right? You're going to have transactions that flow through. If you're monitoring fraud, same kind of concept. You're probably going to alert on people that are potentially committing fraud and provide some of your reasons here from a scoring perspective that helps manage your fraud. That's just a simple connection point there. Another nice thing we do that might help as well, consider this if you're at a bank, this is kind of fun we did. As we build our alerts and aggregate them, we also provide another text summary of what we did. This is not AI. This is just literally, along with the rules we're firing, we found it very productive to provide just a simple paragraph so the person triaging these alerts can say, oh, that's the human readable thing that's happening, versus this complicated list of metrics that some people may not like. Here's a quick snapshot of the network, and then from there, we're going to select the first one. Actually, we're going to look at the more of the detailed look. So here's an example of why all the analytics we ran after we fused the data, they're surfaced here in our scorecard. So again, we're only looking at one type of data, the SAR. Again, if this was fraud, if it was AML, you're going to have different factors here. But in our story of filing SARs, we're basically pulling out some of the top-down business rules that were suspicious, and this is all configurable, right? So we built our platform to be very configurable. We've configured it to point out high-risk things. So if a bank thinks there's human trafficking in one of those SARs, that was, it's only a small contribution, but there's a lot of different business type of rules, as well as our network analytics right here. This is our eigenvector. This is our a score that represents the complexity of the network. As you can tell, opportunity so far for us, we've got it as one of the most highest contributing factors of our model, because from a financial crimes perspective, or really from a criminal network perspective, the more entities that are out there, we've kind of deemed that as a higher risk, just because they've got more abilities and more opportunity as a part of their criminal network. So here's an example of what we all like to see, network diagrams, right? So again, this is all happening automatically behind the scenes, but here's a resolved person. So this is the entity resolution piece, whoever asked that. What we've done is, this is our business data. These are the SARs, or the reports. We've resolved a single person from all of these reports and essentially highlighted that they're actually all connected. Next thing is, this is our network analytics. This is a huge thing I'd love to share with you guys, whether you're in banks or anybody. One of the nice things about our investigation platform is we have these things called node decorators. So where analytics become very, very fun to provide intelligence to your investigators is using our node decorators to highlight what's important on these charts. Because these are fun things to look at, but how do you tell an investigator, where do I start in all this chaos, right? We used network analytics to highlight this person or this SAR right here is the most productive path to go, because there's more things going that direction The betweenness is essentially saying that there's a lot of pathways, so continue this direction. So this is the same SAR. We're going to continue down that path. What's nice here is I can see there's other interesting pathways. There's a shared phone number with another set of SARs, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of I'm going to say it again, this is why it's important, I think, to zoom out, to view data in its totality. Again, the system did all of this behind the scenes. I'm just trying to find the best way to present it to my investigators, whether it's AML, whether it's fraud, whether it's law enforcement triaging their intelligence, it's the same concept. Here's a super zoomed out view of this same network of SARs. So that's the Francisco Garza, that's the original person we looked at. Here's the complexity in their network. Again, one of our highest contributing factors is because we believe there's high confidence connections through shared bank accounts to other people and other SARs in this network that kind of span a lot of different things. So that's kind of the important thing here is we're taking a much bigger, I hope this kind of explains in one shot the totality of data, right? Because this is something that normally takes months from what we've learned in working with law enforcement just to connect the dots, just to go through the administrative effort of saying, take that name, go back to the database, type it in, search, pull that data down, take that next set of data, and recursively try to build this out. All of this is done, and again, it doesn't happen at a snap of a finger. There's some work to configure it, but all of this is done in an automated fashion. Actually. So what I want to do, I shouldn't have done that already, but what I want to do is kind of give you a view without SAS, right? So the work we've done here to build this network is really cool. Let's pretend that, what I'm going to do next is remove all of these key connections in this network and give you perspective of what this would have looked like if we did not take this approach to fuse data through entity resolution and build our networks. It's essentially, you kind of got a preview of it. But this is what it looks like without all that. So that is a very different view. As an investigator, I don't know where to start. I mean, it's just kind of a mess. So again, it's something that we take a lot of pride in, is building networks with a lot of the tools that, again, I could provide some more detail later if you'd like to hear. Another network. Last network, and we'll start winding down. If anybody has questions, you're welcome to ask. Here's a network of SARs. Different use case, but this is highlighting the value of looking at NLP to extract entities from your data and using that to enrich the original network data. So for example, these nodes here, that little orange icon, I've used that to highlight, again, it's a VI, or it's a functionality we have called node decorators, to highlight this was extracted from that data using NLP, is essentially why I've highlighted that. And why that's important is now we've identified connections that we would have never known. So here's a crypto wallet that's connected to another SAR. Here's a Cash App handle that's connected to another SAR. We've done this automatically to fuse that financial intelligence together. So now, right out of the gate, I understand there's a much bigger picture. I see there's a victim that's connected. It's a whole different, and now the real question here is, if you're in law enforcement, is if I'm doing this and I'm extracting these entities, think about if I found the crypto wallets and the bank accounts that are being used by victims to send money to scams. What if I could look up those accounts for accounts that do not have a SAR and start proactively attacking those banks, not attacking, working with those banks as a part of that feedback loop to try to stop whatever illicit activity is going on. So that's kind of another interesting thing about using network analytics, using NLP to extract this. Lastly here, again, back to NLP, the same NLP model we use to extract. Another cool thing you can do within our platform is take that same exact model and display it to your investigators. So you know, and again, this is within our law enforcement platform. I could take unstructured text like this right here and highlight the different entities that we've extracted that was the same model that was used behind the scenes to build the network that we just looked at. Lastly, we can have dashboards. So this is another nice thing we do in our platforms. We highlight, dashboard reports. We've got different workflows that are used to operationalize the process. This is something anybody should consider in any of our investigation platforms, is building the other workflows you can do. It's all very point and click. I'd always encourage you, if you have any of our products that are built on Visual Investigator, just try to learn and get enabled with how you can build your own pages and your own workflows. They're all very point and click, drag and drop, easy to enhance some of the workflows you may need to document. So where do we go from here? I think one of the first steps, I've said it a lot now, is embracing the totality of data that you can assimilate. And that's hard to do at first. Like, that's a hard thing to do, because a lot of us may think about, all right, I'm going to do anti-money laundering or fraud, and I want to focus on transactions, SIFT data, and wire data. I don't know, just picking them out. That's great, that'll solve problems. But how do we zoom out a little bit further and think about what other types of data, or even just within that data, how do I think a little bit further and try to view that information in its totality? And again, that leads us to building networks. Once we have that, how do we apply analytics to analyze those networks, as well as the entities within those networks that are, again, thinking broadly, thinking in their totality? Obviously, we're always going to want to strengthen feedback loops. That's a big challenge. But I think the thing I'll leave you guys with is, can we think about network investigations, at least as an idea? Again, I'm not saying go right back to your bank or wherever you work and just say, let's go do this in production right now. I'm saying, maybe take this back to your sandbox, your pre-prod environment, and maybe look at your alerts you're creating right now as an idea. See which alerts are actually connected in close networks. So let's say you have 1,000 alerts. If I can network those alerts and that takes me down to 900 records to investigate versus 1,000, well, I've now reduced my volume by 10% for investigators. And again, that's just theoretical. You guys need to investigate that further, but that's some of the simple ideas of trying to think about things network by network versus alert by alert, or more atomic level. So the technology exists, and we can definitely help you guys do that. Here's my contact information. I promise, if you scan this, I'm not going to steal your identity. This is something that you can scan. It should pop up on your phone, the native contact app. Just click Save a Contact. There's no external website. It's a pure digital business card, so feel free to call me. Happy to do demos. I've got to get on a flight soon, so I can't talk too much, but if you guys want to see more of this in real time, happy to share. But again, I just want to make sure you guys get that full vision of where we're headed with regards to building networks to fuse information together and look at financial intelligence. Thank you.
We do have a few moments for Q&A.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions.
Firstly, great presentation. Just fantastic work. The network analytics which you're actually showing is based on events which have already happened, right? Like what has been your success rate in using the network analytics for predicting any future-based events? Is there any value to using network analytics like traditional machine learning algorithms?
Not for prediction. I haven't used it for predicting future activities. I've used it think of it more of maybe as a segmentation type of model, or segmentation approach. If I can segment my entities based on how they're connected, that's maybe a way I've seen it work better, is it adds another dimension to feed your model, not necessarily enhancing your response variables, if that makes sense. Okay.
Steve, we have done that in fraud, where we use a network connection to increase somebody's risk. So in the fraud world, we pre-build these networks, and the fact that one person has an association with, let's say, another known fraudster, that then goes into the scoring engine to increase the risk of that other individual that has that relationship. So it has been done using predictive models.
Any other questions?
You talk about trying to find a needle in a haystack. And it seems like sometimes synthetic identity present even more of a problem, just the volume that it generates.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything that seems to be working to try to distill that down, from like 10,000 credit card applications into one entity, that kind of stuff?
I think it's a challenge. If you guys have comments, feel free to jump in. I think it's a challenge. One of the things one of the ways I would attack that if we're talking about network analytics is Maybe look for indirect connections that maybe, again, it depends on your data, depends on what you have available. One of the things I like to explore is what are connections we can infer indirectly, but that's still a much deeper conversation. But Beth, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think the power of network analytics is also enhanced by bringing in external data and signal to really enhance the data that we don't have to make those connections. And that can be done through enrichment partners that bring in device signal, that bring in intelligence about their credit history, intelligence from all sorts of different digital footprint that they have as they're accessing digital channels, applications, especially with the propensity of online in terms of a onboarding channel. So that really completes the network and provides many of those connections that are otherwise unseen. And I think the key to unlocking the power there is, I think for those of you that are using external data, you're probably aware that each one of those data connections or pieces of information costs you money. So to me, the key in unlocking this is not only network analytics, but intelligent orchestration to ensure that we're good stewards of when we call that third-party data provider and providing more of a waterfall through orchestration so that we're not calling all data at all times for all purposes, because I think that those API calls certainly add up, and that's how we can bring those two technologies together to really solve that problem. And I guess the second part was, are we seeing success? Absolutely. I think there's been phenomenal really stopping fraud at the front door is the way we think about it before they're ever able to get in and actually transact. So looking for synthetic applications and minimizing that account takeover activity and other types of fraud that we can stop before they're ever able to move money is a very effective way of having kind of a layered fraud approach, anti-fraud approach.
And one of the most simple ways for synthetic identities is looking at originating IP address for online transactions. And the smarter crooks are going to be using VPNs or multiple computers, things like that. But the lazy guys, which there are a lot of them, if you've got 10,000 new applicants coming in with what looks to be unique information for each one, if they all come from the same IP address, that's suspicious and something you want to look into. So that's just a really simple way to do it. There's lots of other device data that we can collect to drill down on that electronic channel even further to try and see if it's the same entity. But IP address, you have that because it's hitting your website. You don't have to buy third-party data for that. The other deep device information generally needs to be procured from a data provider.
Any other questions?
Bear with me, I'm not part of this industry. Have you guys done much testing with, I guess, false negatives? I mean, I hear people talk a lot about false positives for fraud and stuff like that. Like, have you done any testing with, like, creating bad actors and seeing if the network finds it or doesn't find it?
Yeah, we do a lot of testing. The optimization side, we definitely do a lot of the false negatives. We can do that through synthetic data we create. I've seen some customers where you may want to create just false alerts almost to kind of test the system. So we've done that before, but I guess, is that what you're asking?
I guess, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about like false positives of like they think it's fraudulent, but it's actually okay. I guess I mean like, is there the instances where you don't catch fraud? Like, do you create bad actors in these networks to see if your models can pick up on it? Or like how often do bad actors make it through without getting caught?
Is this from a network perspective?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking
Yeah. We can, yeah. I mean, I'll say it this way. We definitely see a lot of, I think the first challenge in that is, did we resolve the correct entities, and did we resolve, is this truly a bad actor or not? And I guess one way I'll answer it is, let's say there was a false positive or even a false negative on a bad actor. The other key thing I forgot to highlight was, as a part of the entity resolution process, it's very, very important to have the lineage to track what we call merges and splits. So in that case, the technology approach I would kind of lean on would be, did we get this right or wrong? Having the ability to document that through an auditable process, that's something to definitely consider as merges and splits, and having a workflow around that. So if you do have a bad actor that is not a bad actor, or vice versa, that that intelligence is collected from the end users that are investigating to say, hey, look, that's actually not a bad actor, or that is a bad actor. So then moving forward, the entity resolution model can learn from that and feed from that over time.
Great, thanks.
Any more questions?
If not, thank you so much, Steve, for a wonderful presentation. And let's give
Thank
him
you
a
very much.
round. Thank you.